Hey, everybody, welcome to our webinar on how to be a resource for your investors. I'm Ben Case. I'm the Education and Training Manager over here at Rental Beast, and we're really excited to have you joining us today. So we are very, very lucky to have Mitch as our presenter. He has presented before, and he is back with us today, and he has a ton of real estate experience. He is a broker. He has been an investor and owned 34 properties free and clear now. He's also been a property manager. He had over 550 doors and recently sold his business. So he has experience on the transaction side, the investor side, the property management side. I'm not going to tell you all about him, though. I'm going to let him take the reins and give you a little bit about his background and just kind of let you know who he is. So Mitch, hey, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you, Ben, again for inviting me. It's always fun to do this with Rental Beast. So um, I look forward to hopefully open some of the agents' eyes and see how we do things or how I did things. So I got started in being an investor back in 1998. That's all I wanted to do was be an investor. I didn't want to be an agent. I just wanted to be a passive investor. Well, 3 years into it, my agent at that time asked me to join him, and we started a real estate brokerage. Well, I said, well, if I'm going to own a brokerage, I might as well get my real estate license. And I found out I was really good at finding deals, and I couldn't buy every deal because, we only have so much money. So I would help people find properties. And then I would get the calls from my investor clients saying, hey, do you know a plumber? Do you know an electrician? And lo and behold, we got into the property management business. So we grew that. We also grew with agents through the early 2000s. We had up to 52 agents, and then 2008 hit. And luckily, we were in the property management arena. We were able to help the accidental landlord and the agents that stuck back, and we kind of whittled it down and came more investor centric by building our property management business. We were attracting agents that were investors themselves. So they wanted to be around that atmosphere, and we were able to help them be the back office for them. So they would go out, or I would hand them clients on working with investors. So we actually came up with a training program for working with investors for them, and it really helped that they were also investors. So a lot of people that are looking in real estate investing are looking for that boots on the ground experience. But I sold my property management business in 2022, so that's almost 2 years ago. And so now I'm still flipping houses, excuse me, doing a little speaking like we're doing here. And I also did some training videos, which we can get into on, just investors that want to learn more about buying property.
Perfect, perfect. Well, as you can see, folks, Mitch has a huge background in real estate across a lot of spectrums. And like I said, we're really blessed to have him speaking with us today. And he's got a ton of great content. So first, let's just jump into our agenda and just kind of make sure everyone knows what we're talking about today. So first, the topic, I want to just go over how the topic is relevant to our audience. So first, for our real estate agents, you might have investors, or you might be looking to work in this sphere and kind of break into here. So this is going to help you begin thinking about how to be a resource before, during, and potentially after the purchase of an investment property. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not recommending that we become property managers and manage the property. However, you can help them with the purchase and sale side and understanding, is this a good investment? What does this look like? What do I need to think about and expect and things of that nature? So I just want to be clear there. And for our property managers, you might have licensed realtors in your office. They might be focused on either helping investors grow their portfolio or grow your door count for your property management business. So this is just going to help you understand how you all can be a resource and also just partner with your investors to help them, like I said, be more successful and grow their portfolio, which grows your doors. So what are we going to go over today? What are we going to talk about? First, we're going to cover what does an investor need from you so that they can analyze a deal. Then we're going to go over what it means for a property to be rent ready and just kind of some of the costs that might go with that. And then we're going to get into how you can actually begin building those relationships with vendors. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a little bit on how you can prepare and educate your investors so that they're ready for that next purchase. So we're going to jump right into it and get into just what you need to do to provide an investor, financial data to analyze a deal. And Mitch, let's start with just kind of going over what you like to look at when you're making a comp and then some of the platforms that you maybe use to make those comps.
Right. So I think it all starts as far as when you're evaluating an investment deal. We as real estate agents need to provide what kind of rental comps are going to be available. And I'm more of a let me educate my client on how to do that, but I also want to show them how to do that. So one of the things that we always look for when we're looking at investment property, myself personally, are some of the characteristics that the property has, like number of bedrooms. I think 3 bedrooms are probably ideal. From people that are looking for 4 bedrooms can squeeze into 3. People are looking for 2 bedrooms can always use the space. How many bathrooms? In certain neighborhoods have certain type of homes, whether they're ranch or 2-story or whatever. But we also want to look at the location of the property. Is it what school district? Here in Columbus, I'm actually in Florida today, but back in Columbus, where I have my properties, they, the Columbus City schools are not as good as the adjacent school district. So I can get more rent if I'm outside of the Columbus school district. Also, location, are you next to the freeway? Are you next to railroad tracks? Also, it can come down to the neighbor has 2 pit bulls. And that's a problem. That'll be a problem for your client to find a tenant. So property characteristics, as far as those things, we obviously want to, if you're in the older homes, homes that are 100 years old, you're going to have different problems than you would with something that was built post-war, World War II. So basement issues, you're talking about knob and tube electric, galvanized plumbing. So those are things that your client needs to be considered and things that you need to help them with and watch out for as far as the characteristics of the actual property. And like I said, the neighborhood, we're talking about school district and all that, but also maybe the bus line. Are they close to, we have a big Intel plant coming. Maybe people want to be closer to the Intel plant as far as they see that those properties are going to increase in value. So when I go to look, like I said, you need to start with some kind of spreadsheet on what their monthly cash flow is going to be. I like to triangulate any information that I have. So I'll go out to Zillow, see what they got. And we all know how we feel about Zillow, and sometimes it's inflated. And that's why I triangulate. The second would be Rentometer, where you can put in an address, the actual address, and how many bedrooms, and it'll pull up comps, give you a nice range. Third is also sometimes you can use the MLS. In Columbus, we don't list our properties on the MLS. And then another one is if you have a property manager that you work with, whether it's within your brokerage or outside, call them. They got a real good idea how much stuff is renting for. So, I give the client the tools to do it, and we can review it with them. Again, I want to educate them, and obviously I'm building rapport by doing that. But we can help them out and kind of give them a range of where they want to be on a number, and they can start doing their analysis.
Perfect. So when you're making these comps, where do you kind of see where, areas that people either get it wrong or maybe they accidentally just skew the relevancy of the comps?
Yeah, I think that, for example, we talk about Zillow or even Rentometer, they can't see necessarily the school district's lines. It might be right across the street. I literally have a property that's across the street from another one, and I can get $100 difference because of the school district. So that's part of it. Like I said, the location of it, as far as what's next door, if they're not picking up the yard or they're working on cars in the neighborhood, it's going to possibly hurt you in renting their property. So as far as the class of neighborhoods, that is really about the investor and what their goals are. I have, and we'll talk about class of properties, but class A, B, C, and D. Class A is, probably your best school district, your most expensive, and typically those properties are harder to cash flow because the numbers just don't work that way. Your clients that are actually renting there are typically moving in for a job transfer, and they are just looking for a place until they build their home or they find another home. So you might have a little bit more turnover in these bigger homes. However, the appreciation on those homes are typically faster or higher. So that's A. B is somewhere between C class, and I have a lot of C class properties. My C class properties are those 2 and 3 bedrooms. They're blue collar town areas. I think that's where the numbers work best for me. And then there's D class, and D class for a couple of reasons. They're a lot more transient. The crime in typically a D class area is higher. So I have a hard time finding a leasing agent that's going to lease it, and also contractors that are willing to work there. So sometimes you can't get an A class tenant in a D class area. It just doesn't happen that way. So people, and we'll get into when we get into the rent ready stuff, people that think that area is acceptable, that's where they go, and that's what you're going to end up getting. So if you want a really great tenant, then you got to get at least a good looking property in a better neighborhood. And again, we're going back to investment goals when we talk about what they want to do. And this is how I diversify my portfolio. I have some nicer stuff that's appreciated pretty fast, and I got stuff that's right on the fringe of a D class area that's they're very easy to fill, and I like those too. So that's my diversification mutual fund real estate portfolio. So
I think that makes sense. And I love how you just kind of go into the neighborhood breakdowns of, class A to D, and just saying it's not always just the numbers. You got to consider a couple certain factors or areas, how that might affect your turnover, or just, other factors based on the, neighborhood, to help you align your expectations with your investor goals on knowing what you're trying to achieve with the property.
Yeah, I would tell you, Ben, we were taking on towards the end of when I had my property management business, 80% of our new business would come from out-of-town investors, and the out-of-town investors weren't familiar with those areas. And that's where I became an expert, and people felt comfortable because I understood neighborhoods, and I would tell them, no, you don't want to do this deal. But on paper, they look great. What they don't know is the neighborhood or that older home. So my job is to make sure that they're not just a one trick pony. I want to make sure that we're building a portfolio for them. So on paper, it looks great, but the turnover in those properties in the D class areas, I've managed in that area, and I got out. So.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So when you've identified a property, what are you looking at to try to help your investors just kind of determine if the numbers work? Is there anything you like to do there?
There's multiple ways that people can do it, and I kind of just go through it, and they end up deciding what works for them. Obviously, a lot of people have heard the term cap rate. People use that cap rate or rent multiplier. And obviously the 1% rule is pretty common. So if you have $1,000 rental, then you're not going to spend more than $100,000 for a property. So again, that's something that I want to go through with them, and as far as explaining them and how they're doing it. And then as long as they're consistent with them analyzing every deal. So I like to kind of just walk that through. I'm their financial advisor at that point, and I'd rather just have them present me the deal, because they'll start rattling off, saying, "Hey, I'm looking for another return would be cash on cash return." Great. I have no idea how much money you're putting down. I don't know how much you can borrow. So you need to figure out what you're comfortable with. Tell me how that looks, and then we start working together. And because again, I don't want to be the expert person to the point where someone says, "Hey, should I do this deal or not?" I'm not one to speak. I was buying stuff 25 years ago that was so darn cheap that what people are paying today, they're crazy, right? So I try and put it back on them to make sure that they understand, so they have an interest in how their numbers work. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, especially on just like making sure you stay out of hot water with what you promise or how you're looking at the numbers. It's better to really understand their goals, understand the numbers they're using and that they're looking at, what they want to achieve, and then just helping them think through that process and say, is this kind of a realistic expectation based off of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's interesting because talking to people, so we were a property manager, but they might have hooked up with another real estate agent. And, we worked with that agent. We did referrals for if they sent us any business or whatever. So we were all on, above board on all that stuff. But the client real quickly gravitated towards me, and I don't want to cut out any of my agents because they trusted, hey, you date your real estate agent, but you marry your property manager. So they wanted to feel really comfortable with me. And sometimes I would blow a deal. So I'm not here to kill dreams. But like I said, I just want to make sure that we're all under because I want to be doing this for the next, 25, 30 years or whatever.
I love it. I think that's such a smart approach. Well, let's shift gears a little now and just kind of discuss rent-ready repairs and their costs. So once you've kind of, made an offer on a house or you're making an offer on a house, what are you adding in that offer to try to protect your client financially? And what's kind of the process you would recommend an investor complete to get an idea of the scope of the work early?
Yeah, so when we had our property management business, and we would offer this to outside agents too, is we would be involved. I would have my facilities manager involved with the walkthrough when we do an inspection. Him and I could walk through a property within literally 4 or 5 minutes. I could tell you you're going to be roughly 25 minute, $5,000 to get this property rent ready. And we wanted to, as at that point, was it a good idea to continue with the deal because the numbers might go out of whack? So we would always write in there contingent on either my property manager's approval, which can mean a whole bunch of things, or uh, having my contractor walking through and getting those numbers for me. So uh, I think it's important. See, since we were doing it in-house, we were able to have control over it. But I think it's really important, especially if you're working with a client, that they understand some of those costs and they can go out and do their homework, and maybe agents can shed the light on how much does it cost to paint. Well, let's budget $3 a square foot. How about flooring, $3 to $4 a square foot? How about a kitchen, $8,000, unless it's something big. How about a bathroom, 6,000? So those are just numbers that just come off the top of my head because I've been doing it so much. But if we know that we can walk in and do those numbers fast, and then write in the contract contingent on my, successful review from my contractor, they can get me a rough quote. And then we have some idea if we're going to continue with this deal or not. So.
A lot of great advice there. So, as the real estate professional, we have a due diligence to the client to mention items that seem like they need attention or repair. How do you like to address these and just kind of go over this with a client when you see them?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the advantages of being an investor myself and working with clients. I do get, if you have knowledge about something, then you got to bring it up. And so I get to see all the bad stuff. So obviously we've gone through properties where we FaceTime or whatever, where we do, our due diligence walking through the property. But, we're looking at, the roof repairs, basement stuff, old panel we've got. again, because I'm the one who ends up has to fix it, and they're going to ask, "Hey, why didn't you pick up on this?" I want, we're pulling our heads out of the sand, so we want to make sure that everybody is seeing everything that's going on. So, again, we want to be upfront with everybody, and just this is the reality of real estate investing. It's not what you see on late night television or you know gurus seminars and all that stuff. So this is not a guru seminar, right, Ben?
No, no, not a guru seminar. So I know when we were talking, one of the things you also talked about was just how you like to say it, with disclaimers around just kind of protecting yourself and phrasing it a little bit. Could you talk about just kind of how you sometimes like to mention these repairs to them?
Yeah, I mean, here's what we run into is, and I did it myself as an investor, is a lot of people think that I buy a property, I make it rent ready, I'm done. I don't have to spend any more money. Well, the bigger ticket items, which are called typically CapEx, capital expenditures, those are things that are happening in the next 3, 5, 8 years. And a lot of investors don't plan for those big expenses. So say, look, what we want to do is we want to make sure that you don't put yourself in a jam where you're losing sleep at night or you're putting your family in jeopardy because you got to put a new roof on. You do have an obligation to provide proper housing. There's laws in place to make sure that we as investors do that. So let's make sure that we're covering this stuff. And obviously that's why we get inspections. And for example, we have a house that I'm writing a deal on this afternoon. The hot water tank's from 2005, so that's 19 years. And a hot water tank can last anywhere from 8 to 12 years, so it's beyond its life. So I'm going to ask that I get a new hot water tank because it's just a matter of time before it comes in. And what we're doing is, or what I try and instruct my investors is, so what you don't want is after on Thanksgiving, you get a call in the afternoon and the hot water went out and they have a house full of family. So let's go ahead and replace that because it's going. So let's go ahead and do that. So things like that where you kind of actually tell the story of, you're going above and beyond what you need to get done. So, obviously we're talking about, some safety items too. So.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're considering if a home is a good investment just kind of worth making rent ready, are there certain items that you like to shy away from or just say, hey, we need to operate with, caution if we're going to take this on?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier. Again, for us in Columbus, it's slate roofs, it's knob and tube electrical, it's galvanized plumbing, and then also we have stone basements. Stone basements are exactly what they are. They're big pieces of stone that when you go repair them, they can be costly. Also we have basements here in Ohio, and it's a hole in the ground, and we take on water. So eventually they leak. So we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that we're not leaking. So those are just the things that you have to deal with in older homes. But you just got to know that. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. As far as the stuff that might make me run away, and again, I want to tell my client this is, that if the roof is fine, the shingled roof is fine, but you just got to know when you go for repair, those guys, there's about two in town, and they're $150 an hour. So you just want to make sure. Same with basements. I just had a basement that I just redid, but we have bowing walls on block walls. For me, it's no big deal. It's $500 a beam. We put them up every 4 feet, and it's no big deal. However, if you got block that's deteriorating, that's something different, and that's something for sure that I would run away. As far as mechanics or mechanicals, again, we're talking about old systems. HVAC, we want to make sure that we don't have any leaks as far as plumbing leaks or gas leaks. So we just want to make sure that those things are tight. So again, we just want to make sure that they have an understanding of what we're trying to do. So
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. All right, so let's say we've done our inspections, we've went ahead with the purchase, and now it's time to get the place rent ready. What's kind of your basic checklist that you use to determine if a property is ready to be listed?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start with safety first. So we're going to put smoke detectors where we need them, one on each floor, near the kitchen, outside the bedrooms. The last thing you want is to get sued because of fire, and God forbid anybody lost their life. So we don't want to do that. Another thing that you want to make sure, how are the windows? Do they open? Do they stay open? Do they lock? It will come up. And so you might as well take care of those. They might be as simple as a repair, or you might have to replace them. So the electrical is another one. And again, this is getting shows up on your inspection report. If you got open junction boxes in the basement or you have an old panel, your insurance might drop you. So let's go fix those things, or at least negotiate those when we write this offer. So, and then we start getting into cosmetic stuff. And it's just like when you list a home, you want to make sure that it looks really great. Everybody's focused on the kitchen and bath. So let's make sure it's clean. We can do the minimum of that, but you got to think about your competition. My properties, the way I position them is my properties are going to be the best ones on the street, and they're going to be nice and clean and they smell good. So just like a new car, that new car smell, it really helps when you're trying to market the property. So let's go ahead and paint the walls. We might have a pet odor that's going on. I have a house right now that we're trying to remedy that. I actually had to remove the baseboard because the cat destroyed the baseboards. So we in, using kills and bins and sealing all that in, but new carpet, also the smell of new carpet helps with that. But what I'm trying to do is I have found, and this is what my results are, and I was trying to get we had 200 clients at the time, and I was trying to pull them down my way of thinking, and not everybody thinks that way. But what I have found is if you've got a property that looks really good online, so that means you can paint cabinets. You don't have to replace them, but they look nice and fresh, newer countertops. We would do backsplash, which is not that much. If it's in a lower priced home, we might even put wallpaper up, and it looks really good online. Same with bathrooms. We might stage them a little bit with a shower curtain or towels. And if we get great pictures, you attract more tenants, you attract better tenants. And if they have a great experience, they're going to stay longer. So the average stay in Columbus is about 16 months. Our company wide, we were probably over 3 years. And my personal properties, I'm probably in the 4 to 6 year range. And that, as investors, that's where we make money, is no vacancy. So I'm trying to get the best product that's out there and increase my chances of a tenant renewing their lease, because that's where I lose money.
I think that makes sense. You heard it here, folks. That's the winning formula right
That's the
there.
winning formula. I'm here
Yeah,
to
if you're
say
trying to
that.
lower your churn on your rental properties, that's it, and decrease your vacancy time. So,
That's
a
right.
lot of good advice. Well, I know we went over this a little bit here, but real quick, when we're getting a house rent ready, are there some affordable repairs or opportunities that you see to increase the home value or maybe the rent that you can get that you just kind of say like, hey, we really got to do these? I know we covered a little bit of that just now, but any kind of final thoughts or additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the smells are you need to be addressed. It's, like smoking and all that stuff that sometimes leaves behind a smell. But you really need to address that, because if you smell it, they're going to smell it. Airing out the house and all that stuff. But again, the kitchens and baths, I think that's where you need to spend a little bit more of your money. And it's not that much. We're not talking that much more, but it's just impactful, especially when you get those great pictures online. Um, like I said, we lightly staged the property to show a little bit better. So curb appeal. So we're talking about landscaping now. Let's cut some beds, fresh mulch. You don't have to spend a lot of money, $200 or $300 on landscaping, but a nice clean look when tenant first pulls up, they'll feel, okay, I like this. This house is the nicest house on the street. So it's not that much more money. And it's very important, just like on a regular listing, to use quality pictures. Some people do virtual tours, which is great. Some people have professional photographers that go out and take their pictures. So not a bad idea to have great pictures like that. So
Yeah, a lot of great advice here. One quick question. I know a lot of people probably asking it after hearing all this, but what do you do or how do you recommend advising an investor who's a little cheap and maybe is shying away from doing some of these repairs we got here on the screen?
yeah, I mean, so obviously we were doing anywhere from 15 to 25 turns a month, and we would present to the client about fixing up the property, and we would present to them, say, hey, look, this is what you need to do, and this is what you should do. So those should do is, putting that little bit extra sparkle on it. But again, the goal is to maximize the asset. And sometimes it's hard to think of from a month to month versus over time. And you really don't know if you've got a good property till you're 4, 5, 6 years down the road. You just don't know. Because you come to find out that someone, all of a sudden you find out the neighbors have dogs or whatever it might be. So I tell people, say, look, you're doing all this stuff, but you won't spend another $400 on replacing the green shag carpet. So what happens is, if you're going to keep that carpet, you're going to attract green shag people, meaning that they think that that's acceptable. And those aren't the tenants that you want and I want. We want people that are going to stay there a long time. So green shag carpet gets green shag people. So step up your game and let's go get a nice tenant, because that's where it's all at. That's where it's at.
I love that approach. And I think it makes 100% sense. The value and curb appeal reduces the turnover, which means higher quality tenants, which means more tenants with more predictive renter patterns. So it increases the value and it's a benefit. While it might be an upfront cost, it really is an investment in the asset throughout the longevity of it and maximizing the return, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on now, we're going to go on into finding contractors for your investors. So real quick, let's start with just kind of what vendors you would recommend as kind of must-haves or ones that you would focus on early of just saying, hey, we got to have these in our Rolodex.
Yeah, I mean, you need, when a property goes occupied, you want maintenance people that are willing to work with tenants after hours. So you need to find somewhat of a handyman that's willing to do that, that's professional. They're not coming in, with, ripped clothes or a gun, that sometimes that happens. So you want to make sure that you have good maintenance people that are available after hours. We want all the disciplines taken care of as far as HVAC, plumbers, and electricians, especially after hours. And I would say that you'd want two of all of these, because people get busy or people fall off. We're constantly looking for contractors. So it's important to get those. Now, obviously, you can go start finding the driveway people and the roofers and the window guys, your garage door opener guy, your locksmith. But those people you want to keep in play and make sure that they know who you are. So.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially like you said, just really understanding like how they operate, what their availability is, and just kind of ensuring the expectations of what acceptable behavior is, that all that aligns. I think that is key to also just kind of take away from it as well.
Yep.
So when you're actually trying to grow your network of reliable vendors, how are you kind of doing this and how are you maybe positioning that working relationship with them?
Right. So, obviously, with working with contractors, they can't do everything, but a lot of these guys know a guy, and I'm the guy that knows. So, so I might have my guy that's fixing up my property right now, but he doesn't do flooring. But I bet you know somebody. So a lot of the contractors will share names. Sometimes they work underneath them, and that's fine. Also, other agents that are working with investors, Sometimes they have great people. Also, other investors that I work with, other house rehabbers that we work. Hey, you know, electrician. I lost my electrician. He's not available. He's in Florida or whatever. So, you want to constantly be asking, but also I like to go to, whether it's Home Depot or Lowe's earlier in the morning and find those guys that are getting ready for the day. So they're, they have their van. So take a picture of their van, or if you run into them in the store and start talking to them and say, hey, I'm a, I'm an agent and I'd like to talk to you about maybe some business.
I think that makes sense. And I love how you're saying the ones that get there early. I know when we were discussing kind of how do you prospect these parking lots, you were like, hey, if they're there early, they're on their stuff, they're getting their supplies. But if they're showing up, maybe late morning, middle of the day, they might not have done a great job. So I
Right.
thought that was a good point when you were kind of going over that and we were just discussing some of these items.
Right.
So when an investor does make a purchase on a home and they need to get it ready, how do you recommend, they either review vendor options or how are you presenting these to them so that you're not actually, steering them into a choice?
Yeah, I mean, we as investor or agents, we're required to give them options. We can't, we all know that we have our favorite world, our favorite title company, our favorite escrow company, our favorite inspector, our favorite, but we're not allowed to steer them because if something goes bad, you can get blamed for it. So we're required to give at least three recommendations. So, start writing these names down, and obviously, they're going to say, yeah, but who would you recommend? And you're basically it's, they did some work for me last month. They did a good job, or I'm hearing good things about, Ben Case's company. So you might want to give them a call. So you just want to make sure that you're doing that. As far as them working with contractors, they need to figure that out. And I'm sure they can do a little AI and find out how to work with contractors, but put it in writing. And I encourage, I say, hey, I'm giving you this list of people, and these are some of my people here. Make sure that you really want to get ahead, pay them quickly. I pay all my contractors, I pay by Thursday because I want to be their favorite client. And I might need, that hot water tank on Thanksgiving, and I want to make sure that he knows that I pay fast. Because a lot of the good guys that I find, they're smaller companies or 2 or 3 man operations. They seem to be hungrier. They're not wrapped up in all their marketing and stuff that you see on TV. They don't charge as much, obviously. So those are the people you want to go after. So.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that point on, encouraging our investors to pay them quickly. These are relationships that you've built, not just, vendors. These are people that you've worked with that you also value. So making sure that both sides of the equation respect each other, I think that's important. It goes a long way.
Yep.
So let's move into our final section now, and that's going to be how we can be a resource and educate our investors. So what do you think we can be doing as agents to, be a better resource, or what can we be providing to our investors to help them get educated?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've been working on this presentation, Ben, for a couple of months now, and I just think about how I built my business, and I didn't even know what was happening, but I was finding out that I was just becoming a resource by getting them closer to what they wanted to do. I think what is happening, or what happens in the investor world, is, you know, bigger pockets, great platform, so much education, but there's a certain point I need to, me as an investor, I needed to hear and see and feel and touch actually someone doing what I wanted to do in the town I wanted to do. You don't understand. Columbus is different, so I needed to feel more comfortable with that. So I felt that what we would do is we would have actually little investor seminars where people would come in, and I would just go through from beginning to end, on, talking with a bank and, what type of properties to look at. Here's a deal that we want to present today. So what that developed into was this investor series that I have, and I think we'll have a QR code in a little bit, but I got together with Keller Williams and was able to, from end to end on, are you emotionally ready to be an investor? What's it going to take? How to walk through a property, and I got videos of walking through how to do. Should I self-manage? Should I hire a third-party property manager? The pros and cons of both. Obviously, I leaned heavy on hiring a property manager. So, but just an education, and I actually designed it around my son, who's 26, and he's just got his first property this year. So I wanted to make sure that I was putting him in a good place, and obviously any other investors. So that inviting them to webinars like this, any kind of networking that's local, is a great place to meet other investors and other deals that are going on that, you might have something that you can't do anything with, or someone else doesn't have money to go buy something. So local meetups are awesome for that stuff. Also, sending out articles or any kind of content to your client. And basically what you're trying to do is you want to be the go-to person for this information, especially locally. And if you can provide that kind of information, you're going to lock them in a lot longer because they trust you. And, I think that's just the better way to do it. If you teach them what you know, again, maybe you should go out and buy one investment property so you can say you're an investor. People just gravitate towards that and they're like, oh, you did it. And there's a confidence thing that people need to get to. And I think investors, and I think that your confidence builds once you have more education. So
I think that makes a lot of sense. I know when we were talking before your first webinar, you were telling me the story before you actually got into investing, and you and your wife had talked about it. It was at the point where your wife was saying, go get the property. But, what really put you over the line was, like you said, meeting an investor in that area who had done it and getting to really talk to them and start to walk through what that looked like and start to visualize yourself getting there.
yeah, back in when I started, which I started looking into it, this is 1994, we didn't have the internet. So the only way I was learning about real estate investing was late night television and books. So I would go to a place called Barnes and Noble and have my latte and try and read as much as I could. And I just didn't feel like I was getting enough information or education to pull the trigger. I was living in Kansas City at the time, and we're thinking about moving back to Columbus. Well, I was in Columbus for an appointment, and I pulled up to this office, and it said real estate investing. I'm like, oh yes, I'm going in. So I go in, and I'm like, I need to talk to somebody. I want to find out. So the broker came out, and we talked for probably 2 hours, and he's telling me, how he does it and all this stuff. And I'm doing this, I'm doing this. I think I probably got off the phone and said, we're moving to Columbus. So I just felt that I could, learn. I learned real quick on what to do, what not to do, and working with him because he ended up actually being my partner later on. But it was just enough because the education wasn't there, didn't have the internet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we had a lot of good content that we covered here. I absolutely love everything that you shared with us, Mitch. Really appreciate you presenting. And before we move on to Q&A, I know we got a few next kind of steps, action items for people. Everyone likes to be able to take action. So the first thing I want to do is I want to encourage you to look at Mitch's Investors series. We are going to have the QR code on the Q&A slide for you there. If you're interested in it, it is an amazing course. And it's really great, not just for you as an agent, but also to share with your investors. Like he said, I know one of the things he said when we were talking and interviewing is like, hey, you close 2 homes, I'll pay for the investor series or something for you as an agent because it works in your benefit to educate them. So it's a really great course. I saw Mitch put his finger up there. I think
I was just going to say the whole reason why we designed it, Keller Williams approached me was they have obviously agents that are working with investors. So a lot of their agents, they're encouraging them to go buy their own investment property, right? This is a lot of us when we're buying property. But if you can get your client up to a certain point education wise, and you're on the same page as they are on what to look for, this is a resource for them. So maybe you set up a deal where once you buy the third house from me, I'll pay for the course or something like that. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And then we also want to identify gaps in our vendor Rolodex. And next, we want to start actually building those relationships with our vendors. And then again, we kind of honed in on this at the end here, but educating yourself more and starting to reach out to investors with opportunities that allow you to be a resource to them. So a lot of good things that we can take out of this. We're going to move on into the Q&A section now. And like I said, we've got the QR code there on the screen for y'all if you're interested in learning more about Mitch's series. It's really great, like I said. And I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Could we put the questions in the webinar chat, though? For some odd reason, I'm clicking on Q&A, but it's not popping up. So if we can be putting it in the webinar chat, I can field those unless they're popping up for you, Mitch. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties.
Actually, I just got it.
Okay.
You want me to start reading them?
Yeah, I'll let you go through it and pick the ones that you like then.
I'm going to answer all of them.
All right, let's do it.
Let me see. Will you send the recording link later? You
Yes.
just got that. So that was at 2:02. So um Mr. Watkins, Mrs. Watkins, will this be recorded and shared?
Yes, it will be. We will be sending out a replay. You'll probably get it tomorrow morning.
Okay. Same question below. He missed the beginning. Is tenant screening the same across all property class types? What are the unique challenges between B and C class and class A properties? All right, great question. So the screening process is the same, except what you're going to have is, for example, when we qualify, you have to be consistent, by the way, because we got to watch out for fair housing. 3 times the income. So typically in an A class neighborhood, they're going to have to make a lot more money than a C class. The challenges of, let's go through them each one by one. The challenges on a class A property is it usually takes longer to fill the property. Just like on regular real estate sales, you have more activity in May, June, July, and August because they're trying to get in during school break. So that's another challenge that you have with A class. And also I found there's a little bit more turnover in A class because again, they want to try and find their house that they want to move into. B class, it's just a little bit less of that. It's just a nicer, typically B class is a C class, but it's in a nicer neighborhood or it's a newer home. So that's basically the difference. C class, it's all the normal stuff that you hear about property management as far as C class. Most of them are just permanent renters. They're not necessarily home buyers at the end of the day. I don't know if there's anything unique about it, but hopefully I answered your question. If not, then ask me another one. Antonio, please repeat your explanation of the 1% rule. Okay. So 1% rule is if I have a $150,000 property, I can get $1,500 a month. So basically 1% of the purchase price. It's very hard to find that deal in Columbus, Ohio, but there's other parts of the country that you can. Letitia, will this recording be sent to the participants, Ben?
Yes, it will be. Yes.
Okay. Anonymous. Anonymous has a lot of questions. Is the distinction between class A through D subjective, or are there some objective standards for each market? If it's subjective, is there criteria established by the client, and is there a guide to provide the client? I don't know if I have enough time to answer all that. I think it's a little bit of both, objective and subjective. If that Sorry, I can't answer that one clearly on this call. Sorry about that. Mohammed, which you prefer, resale versus new construction for investment? Uh, Prefer resale versus new construction for investment. So, it really depends on the area. So I can only tell you about Columbus. New construction, as long as the numbers work, that's great. However, it'll never be new again. I have found that in Columbus anyway, resale properties, you can get them for cheaper and the numbers look better. So new construction is probably it's A class automatically because of the condition of the property. And like in Columbus, the only new construction you're getting is pretty much outside of the Columbus School District, which I was talking about earlier, is not as great as other parts of town. Also, single family versus, I'm assuming TH is townhomes. So here's what I tell you, because a lot of people are all about double, 2 unit, 4 unit. I have found, because remember, I managed 14 units, a lot of doubles and 4 units, 3 units, triplex, whatever. But a majority of our portfolio was single family, and I think it's because I educated them on why I like single family. It's a little bit easier to get loans on them. People stay longer on a single family because they're treating it like their home. So those right there gravitate towards me. When I first got into it, I bought a 24 unit and a 15 unit, and the neighbors complaining about their neighbors drove me nuts. And by the way, on multifamily, even if it's a double, you have additional expense. You're doing snow removal, at least in Columbus. You're taking care of the lawn and the outside, but I find that you have more turnover in a townhome slash multifamily. So hopefully that answered your question, Mohammed. Eddie, I ran over an earlier appointment and headed to another. Can I get recording? Yes, it's coming your way. Eddie, we're going to take care of you. Can we have a recording? Yes, you can. T. Henry, how do I protect myself as an agent with off-market deals? That's a good one. I think that's how you start the conversation with your client. You write the deal on a state board contract, however you write your offers, and you go out of your way to protect your client as much as you can. I think you also share with your client on the things that you need to watch out for. For example, off-market stuff we got to watch out for. Does this seller really even own the property? We're talking about wholesaling now, which is not bad if you do it the correct way. But you just need to make sure that, for example, okay, so where's the property disclosure form? In Columbus or in the state of Ohio, you are required to have the seller, whether it's off market or not, to fill out a residential property disclosure form. So if they know of anything wrong with the property in Ohio, they must disclose it, whether it's on market or not. So you as an agent, you kind of have to take over the deal, and I don't want to say strong arm, where you're going to say, look, you need to disclose whatever you know that's wrong with the property. So I think that's, again, disclose, and that's why we have inspections and contingencies. Just go out of your way on how to do it. How to calculate ROI. Again, that goes into there's multiple ways. I was at the beginning, I got in, how fast cash back. So if I had to put 20 grand down and my property was, I can't do the math quick enough. I'm clearing $200 a month. That's $2,400 a year. We'll do it real quick, if you don't mind. 2,400 divided by 20,000. I don't even know if I did that right. That's a 12% return. So that's how I did it at the beginning, but a lot of people do it different ways. Cash on cash return was one of them. And then cap rate, which is you'll have to Google cap rate on how to figure that out. So if an investor needs help with numbers, would you recommend them over to CPA or a website? I would recommend them go into Bigger Pockets and learn about it. Obviously, you can say, you can contact a CPA, but a CPA doesn't necessarily understand what rents are. And you can provide them with the information, but there's so much on Bigger Pockets, calculators on there. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Anthony, what questions do you ask to determine if an investor is serious? How much money do you have? Do you qualify? A lot of times when people call me, I end up, it feels like they're coming right off a seminar. So I want to make sure that they're serious. All right, if I have a deal this afternoon, are you ready to go? Hey, I don't have the money yet. How much money are you going to put down? How much are you going to have for rent ready repair? A lot of it is determined on how much cash they have available. And if you find out they're like, I have access to $35,000 to do this deal, I'm like, okay, it sounds like you're serious. So by the way, while we're on the phone, what have you done to learn about, what do you know about real estate investing? How long have you been thinking about this? So those are good questions. And if you've been doing it at any period of time, you can start hearing how serious they are. But if they're not, if they're trying to tell you to, yeah, just write this offer for, especially in today's market, write this offer for 100 grand less than list. Say, look, I'm not sure I'm the best fit for you. That's the way I approach it. Again, we can get dragged around by buyers, and investors are the same way. So I think it's having the talk is what I call it. So,
And I'd also like to point out real quick,
yes.
Mitch, if you go to rentalbeast.com and you click on resources and then go to Rental Beast University, there's a great webinar actually presented by Mitch that goes over qualifying and kind of determining if they're serious and how to go down that road. So if you're interested, that's a great webinar to refer to. It's currently available. You can watch the replay of that. And it was a wonderful resource for people who asked that exact same question, but really wanted to dive deep into it. So I think we got time for one more question, Mitch.
All right, I'm going right down this list, and I want to hit Janet. Janet, does your investor series include contractor contacts? No, it does not. It was meant for generalities because my contacts would go out and change. Pikes Peak region, I'm not. I'm only in Columbus, Ohio, but it's pretty generalized for that reason. And it was meant to go national with Keller Williams franchise. So,
All right, one more question. We still got one more minute. I lied.
sure. Denise, I'm a new agent. Is your investor course good for a brand new agent? It's perfect for it. Do you recommend getting a few deals under my belt? When you say deals, I'm assuming working with investors. I think it's great for a agent to learn it because then you can kind of like it'll elevate your education too, and you kind of like, man, you got to see this. Do yourself a favor and watch this video. So, yeah.
I think that's great advice. As we learn more about it earlier, it just makes it easier for us to get to where we're trying to achieve. And one of the easiest paths to that is education because it allows us to really be a resource. So, Mitch, thank you so much for being here
We
today.
can't stay on. We can't stay on for another 5 minutes and answer these.
If you want to, if you don't
Yeah.
have a time constraint, I'm perfectly fine. I'll let you roll.
All the money that you're paying me for this. All right, I want to make
Well,
sure that I answer all these questions.
all
We're
right,
almost
let's
done.
do it.
I feel like I'm close to 3 or 4 more questions. So, what do you mean by a rent multiplier? So, um, I wonder if you can Google it where it says rent multiplier. Basically, it's the rents for the year divided by the purchase price. It's almost like the 1% rule, almost. It's kind of a version of it, so you might be able to look it up. Manuel, advice on time management and people management once you begin to grow. Oh, that is an awesome question. So here it is. So as you grow, By the way, there's a great book out there called E-Myth. And as you grow, you're going to find out that you really love doing certain things, and there's things that you can't stand doing. And that can be accounting or administrative or whatever it might be. And what you need to do is start carving out. You need to actually map out on how you do that task or ask or how you're going to do it. But as you grow and you say, I am not going to properties and hanging lock boxes anymore or searching for properties or whatever, but those things that you want to offload is how you start giving more work to some people. So as you know, if you're growing a business, you're going to be really busy until you can have enough work for this person. But great if you can find a stay-at-home parent where they can help you maybe part-time and they can grow into something. But people management is, gosh, we can go on and on about that. That's the next one, Ben.
Right.
And then which is better, buying cash or through loans? How loans work? So if I'm going in for a property, I'm going to pay cash because I'm going to beat anybody that's buying a loan. So I'm going to tell you it's easier to buy with cash because you're removing obstacles of actually closing on the loan. On my loans that I like to use, I actually do what they call a construction loan, which allows me to put 20% down on the property and finance 20% of the repairs. Those are portfolio lenders, and those are your typical or smaller community, smaller savings and loans banks. So that's a whole different topic. But cash is king. I'll be able to bump anybody that's coming through in a loan. But at the beginning, when you're buying properties, I borrowed everything. And once I got to a certain number of revenue on my properties, I flipped the switch. I did a Dave Ramsey and started paying off my properties. So you need to build your portfolio by not overly leveraging and getting loans. So T. Henry grew up in Dayton. There you go, Oregon district. You said be careful about involved in the deal analysis, but I believe this is the main expertise and my investor wants in myself. I understand that. And you can do whatever you want. And again, I'm a broker, so I'm really careful about this stuff. But as far as being analysis, my point is I don't want them to say, what's the cash on cash return for this property, Ben? I want them to say, my response to that is, how did you figure that out? So let's go through it together and make sure that they're not missing anything when they're doing the analysis. So again, you don't want to promise that this property is going to make a certain profitability. And what you don't want is your client to say, you said I was going to be able to get $1,400 a month. No, I actually said, here is the range of what I'm seeing. We're at $1,300 to $1,400 a month. I didn't know you were going to try and rent it in December with the 2 pit bulls that moved in next door. So all I'm saying is just be a little bit careful and walk them through with it. You can be right there walking them down that path. My smart move, never heard of it for client screening. I use Zillow. They don't do a bad job. I have a potential investor who lives in another state where I'm not licensed. Is there a best way to get paid to charge a consulting fee? Yes, you can pretty much call any agent that you want to maybe screen and get a 25% referral. Do you use an investor presentation in a Zoom call with slides when working with new out-of-state investors? I do not. Maybe I should, but I don't. I'm really good on the phone. So, what was the name of that book? I don't know what book you're referring to. Ben, do you remember?
I'm not sure. I missed it.
Okay. Oh, it was E-Myth. E-M-Y-T-H. The guy's name is Michael Gerber. And basically, he tells you how to build a business and why small businesses fail. And it's all about working on the business and not in the business. Awesome book. Put that one on your shelf. E-Myth. What are the criteria to go after off-market properties, like 10 or 20 years old, distressed, whatever? The criteria doesn't make sense. So again, you're going into your analysis. Um, I have no problem with distressed properties because I can get them at better deals. So I had a deal where the lady was a hoarder. She needed to get out of the house because she was obviously couldn't keep up with the property and she was about to lose the property. So I was able to put 10 grand in her pocket. She had a loan on it. I paid I paid 120 for it, and this house is probably 50 years old. I put 60 grand in it, but I cleared 95 grand. So I like distressed properties. They work. Thank you. Thanks for your time today. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, I answered everybody's question. Thanks for letting me play in your sandbox here, Ben.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for coming here, Mitch. Thanks for sticking on. I know everybody here really appreciates you taking a few extra minutes and just kind of making sure we got all the questions answered. And again, I really enjoyed the content. I thought it was really great. And thank you. Just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
everybody.
A great
Have a great
question.
afternoon.
All right. Thank you.